Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're into our third lesson of our Professor for the Future project called Pretty Pictures. And today we're going to dive a little bit more into the actual tools that we'll be using. And so this originally was planned to be on campus, but since campus is currently closed, um, and we don't know when it will be open for the foreseeable future, the tools that we're using are now going to be some open source tools as well, that anyone can download and use on any computer. So not just the ones on campus, but your own as well. So we're going to talk about the tools, and so also a little bit about how the tools work with each other. Um, and shout out to Dr. Monica Keiko Lieng, who introduced me to some of the ways these programs work together back when we were first year grad students. But let's get underway. So some learning objectives for this session is we'll be able to list a few paid and free programs that are made for graphic generation, and then you'll be able to describe the workflow for Adobe Creative Cloud, specifically for creating images. And so this is how most professionals use these programs for creating images and putting things together for print quality. So you'll be able to describe that, and you can find alternatives for these for free ones, and I will show you a little bit about that. But first, a little bit of history. Yeah, before I was a college student, in high school, I had a class where we learned how to use Photoshop, and there was a class around 35 students, and we had internet and games on the computer. So maybe I wasn't paying the most attention to the class, but at least I was introduced to how to use Photoshop. And essentially, my initial Photoshop creation was a magazine cover where we modified the color of the image's eye. So we had a model face on the cover, and we had to change the color from blue to yellow or something. I can't remember. I choose the changing the color from blue to green, I believe. I don't have that specific magazine cover with me. I show it, but it was showed us the power of photoshopping images, and so that was my first introduction. And since then, I've been using Photoshop and other programs for this creation. So, how do actual professionals use these tools? So we talk about exactly how these designers use them. So usually you have an idea or some picture or some camera, and you essentially take this raster image, as we talked previously. So you go out to the wild, you go out to nature, and you take a picture of something. The sensor collects all that light into it. Then the sensor saves that information to some format that you can process, maybe a JPEG or PNG, a TIFF. This image file format, and then you go into Photoshop with that image. So that's one aspect of the workflow. Another aspect is you are thinking of things to draw. So in this case, maybe you are drawing someone take a swim, which is what that drawing is there. In this corner here, it's someone swimming, of course. I am not a very good drawer. So you could use different programs to do these things, maybe an iPad, maybe some Wacom tablets, such as I have, but essentially you're using Adobe Illustrator to make some illustration. So that's another way that you might be able to use that tool. And then another way is think of those print media banners, those big banners that you see on the side of the road. Maybe they were created with a program called InDesign, which essentially is more of a text-based print media type program. So also think of your magazine booklet. It's also a nice way of formatting magazines and books in a way that doesn't require you to create a big work document, but essentially add images and edit them and format things in very nice and complex ways. But essentially, these are all the tools that I'm very familiar with for, like, say, a designer of an image. And so where do you stand? Well, you are right in the middle. So you use Photoshop, you get some camera image, you edit it, you change the colors to make it look to the size that you want. Then you use Adobe Illustrator as well to create a scaffold of illustration. And then finally you use that to move that into the InDesign uh, program to put it all together and have a background image for, like, say, a poster with text as well as illustrations that you may have created with some also some maybe diagrams for a research poster that has quantitative data that you like to display. So that's how these professors use these tools. For the majority of the posters that I've done in graduate school, they have revolved around using this workflow to create posters. Presentations, I use Illustrator and Photoshop to modify those images that I'm interested in using. But for all intents and purposes, sometimes you don't have access to these, so we'll talk about alternatives to this. So now that we're talking about an alternative, this is a screenshot of a program called Inkscape, and it's a free cross-platform program that's primarily used for vector images. And this is one of the programs that we'll learn to use later, but this is free and open source, so you don't have to worry about paying for this one. But as such, there's also caveats that it might not work, as well as some of the the paid programs, because of course it's developed by a community of active people, and they are very, very good. So this is an alternative for Illustrator. So the part that we described about making vector images and making illustrations, this is where you would use that instead. Keitra, which is a relatively new program that I've looked into. It's very, very nice and easy to use, but this is kind of like an alternative for Photoshop and drawing as well. It does have some export capability for vector images, but primarily what I've seen this being used is for raster images. So again, you draw something that is going to be its final resolution, size, or like kind of like modifying some of the layers and colors on an existing photograph that you've taken. So again, kind of like Photoshop is like an alternative for that. So think about how that might be in play. This is the default screen. So at the bottom right, you see the brush presets. So people that actually draw might use this. And over here, you have some color channels on maybe changing certain hues on certain images. Photoshop and Keitra now. These were what back in the day people used filter on Instagram. These were filters that people would do, and there's a lot of math behind that, so it's very interesting to one day talk about using filters in math and how they're so ubiquitous now. Here's another one called the GNU or GNU Image Manipulation Program, or GIMP. This is also kind of like a jack of all trades. People use it as a replacement for Illustrator and Photoshop. It has some nice tools for both of those, and we'll do some tutorials with this image as a processing program as well. What I've seen it be used is for like quick edits that you need to want to change some things very quickly, or remove some parts of some image fairly fast, and so this is a good use for that. I've not used it too much myself, but we will definitely dive into that one later. And then finally, here's the another alternative for InDesign that is also cross-platform. You can use in Linux, Mac, Windows. This is what I mean, the print media usage, where you can make like a single page, a double-sided, threefold maybe brochure, whatever you're making. This is how you would probably do something like this. This is what I would use to make a poster as well. And this is kind of create a new document. This is the new document dialog, so we'll go into that later when we actually use this one and see how it works. But yeah, this is Scribus, and so this is a free one, alternative for InDesign. I'm much more familiar with InDesign, but again, we will go into using this one in the later tutorials. And finally, these are some of the paid programs that other professionals use. We will talk a lot about the specifics of these programs at some future workshop, since we don't have access to these programs anymore on campus. But think about Microsoft Office as a very quick and dirty program to use. You mentioned that in the next one, but think about using that since it's come a long way. The Creative Cloud Suite, which we described earlier, is also very, very important, very, very widespread. Another one that used to be very, very popular is Corel Draw. It's since drawn off in popularity, but still it's an alternative one that you may also want to pay for. But yeah, these are some examples of programs that you may want to look into. And now we're gonna describe how these are gonna fit together to create the framework of research that we want to work on. But okay, that's it for this lesson.